Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the Roman Empire, a civilization that didn't just conquer lands but also mastered the art of keeping time and harmony with nature, especially through the sweet hum of beekeeping. Picture yourself in the warm golden light of the Mediterranean as the first light of dawn breaks. You stand amidst a flourishing Roman estate, listening closely to the gentle buzzing of bees as they emerge from their hives, and you can almost taste the sweet promise of honey in the air. You probably won't survive this night without a honey-induced dream, but before we get there, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you breathe in the morning air, you feel the warm Mediterranean sun kissing your skin, and the sound of a Roman farmer's bees settled into their intricately woven hives, known as skeps, carries through the air. Historians often argue about the origins of Roman beekeeping. Was it inherited from ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, or did the Romans perfect their methods during the Republic? The truth is, the Romans were masters of optimizing everything, including honey production, and they took their beekeeping seriously. This wasn't just about sweetening their food. It was a tool of imperial power, a vital part of both their economy and their spiritual practices. You observe the hives placed strategically around the farms, each buzz marking a step in the collective Roman pursuit of efficiency. Mainstream accounts suggest the Romans pioneered a system of keeping bees in the wild, encouraging them to settle in nearby groves and gardens, ensuring maximum crop pollination and honey production. But there's also a fringe theory that claims Roman farmers believed the more wild the hive, the more potent the honey. Some even thought wild honey might carry magical or medicinal properties, which is why they preserved the natural wilderness surrounding their apiaries. A light joke bubbles up. If only your morning routine involved the soothing buzz of bees, you might rise feeling as productive as the Romans, rather than rushing into a day of meetings. But the Roman way was never hurried. It was strategic. The rhythms of nature guided them, just as the buzzing of bees guided them toward a harvest of honey beeswax and everything in between. The Roman approach to beekeeping was sophisticated, with agricultural manuals written by some of the greatest minds of the era. One of the most well-known texts was written by Cato the Elder, who dedicated an entire chapter in his work De Agricultura to beekeeping. Historians often debate whether his methods were strictly followed in his time, but Cato's treatise outlined the importance of managing bees in a way that would maximize honey yields while maintaining the health of the hives. Roman farmers were keenly aware that bees were not just important for honey production, but for ensuring crops grew and flourished through pollination. As the Roman Empire expanded, so too did their love and knowledge of honey. They used it for everything from food and medicine to cosmetics and even currency. The empire's use of honey wasn't confined to just sweetening dishes. It had a role in every aspect of life, even in their rituals. But more on that later. For now, let's take a closer look at how this Roman approach would come to shape the industry of beekeeping centuries into the future. You walk through the bustling streets of a Roman villa, its stone walls bathed in the soft glow of midday sunlight. The air is filled with the scent of fresh herbs and, of course, honey. You catch sight of a Roman aristocrat's private apiary nestled beside a villa garden, where rows of beehives stand like silent sentinels. Here, the Roman elite engaged in beekeeping not just for their personal use, but as a symbol of wealth and prestige. The honey and wax they produced were sought after across the empire, traded in markets from Gaul to Alexandria. Yet beekeeping in Rome wasn't reserved solely for the aristocracy. It was an integral part of Roman life, from farmers to emperors. Historians still argue about how exactly the practice of beekeeping spread across Rome. Some mainstream scholars believe that Roman adoption of organized beekeeping was influenced by earlier civilizations like the Egyptians, who already had a deep understanding of hive management. The Romans, however, perfected the art of apiculture, creating more efficient methods of hive management and incorporating bees into agriculture. Ancient Roman agricultural texts, such as those by Cato the Elder and Varro, are full of details on how to manage and care for bees. But there's a fringe idea that Roman beekeepers were less interested in the agricultural benefits of bees and more focused on the spiritual significance, believing that honey itself was a divine gift imbued with healing properties from the gods. You probably won't survive without imagining the scents and sounds of this Roman estate. The low hum of bees at work, the faint sweet fragrance of honey wafting on the air, and the occasional crackle of burning wood from nearby workers tending to their daily tasks. You stop and watch as a worker carefully opens one of the hives. A cloud of bees emerges their wings, a blur of movement, but they remain calm as the worker inspects the hive. The respect for bees is evident. Roman beekeepers understood that if the bees were treated with care and reverence, they would reward their keepers with golden honey. They also recognized the importance of timing. Harvesting honey at the right moment was crucial to ensuring the health of the hive and the quality of the honey. Roman farmers had a keen sense of the seasons and how they affected the bees. They knew when to harvest the honey and when to leave the hives undisturbed, understanding the delicate balance between taking from the bees and ensuring their survival. They also took great care in managing the beeswax, which was valuable for much more than just candles. Beeswax was used for making pottery, waterproofing ships, and even in cosmetics. But it's not just the practical uses of honey and wax that make Roman beekeeping so remarkable. It's also their deep understanding of the interconnectedness between humans' nature and the sacred. A light joke flits through your mind. If only your office had its own private apiary, you could take a break and enjoy honey straight from the hive. instead of the vending machine. But here the Romans knew that everything, whether honey, wax, or wine, had its place in the grand rhythm of life. The beekeepers didn't just manage hives. They were stewards of the land, ensuring that the earth's rhythms flowed in harmony with their own. The more you observe, the more you realize how integrated honey was into Roman life. Honey was used not just in food, but in medicine, religious ceremonies, and even as currency. In fact, honey was so valuable that it was often used as a form of tax payment in some Roman provinces. Bees, too, had their place in the spiritual realm. Roman pagans believed that bees were sacred creatures associated with the goddess Venus, who was the goddess of love, fertility, and beauty. It's no wonder that bees, with their intricate and industrious nature, were held in such high regard. As you stand in this Roman villa, you realize that beekeeping was not just an agricultural practice. It was a tradition that linked Romans to their gods, their environment, and one another. The honey produced from the bees was a symbol of the empire's prosperity, a sweet golden treasure that represented both nature's bounty and human ingenuity. The buzzing of the bees is no longer just the sound of work. It's the hum of a society that understood the delicate balance between nature and civilization. You pause for a moment, letting the sun warm your face as the gentle hum of the bees continues in the background. You realize how much you've come to understand the rhythm of Roman life, its careful balance, its reverence for nature, and its deep connection to the sacred. The bees, the honey, the wax, they were all integral parts of a much larger picture. They were a symbol of Roman prosperity, of the way the empire sought to control time, nature, and resources, but also a reminder of the forces of nature they could never truly dominate. You stroll across the villa's well-tended garden, surrounded by hedges, neatly trimmed, and rows of olive trees that seem to hum with the hum of nature itself. As you move deeper into the estate, the aroma of fresh flowers, herbs, and the ever-present scent of honey mingles in the air. A few Romans walk past their faces, still lit by the gentle afterglow of the honey harvest, their clothing smelling faintly of beeswax. They carry jars of golden nectar, ready to be sold at the marketplace or used in the rituals of the gods. You can feel the pulse of the Roman Empire in this small corner of the world. Everything from the trees to the bees working together to sustain the empire's vast machinery. Historians still argue whether Roman beekeeping was truly a revolution in agricultural techniques, or if it simply expanded upon what earlier civilizations had already perfected. Mainstream views suggest that the Romans' use of hives in rectangular shapes, designed for ease of maintenance and honey collection, was a significant improvement over the more traditional round or cone-shaped hives used by earlier cultures. These innovations allowed Romans to produce honey on a much larger scale, turning it into a commodity that was exchanged across the empire. You probably won't survive another day in the Roman Empire without realizing how central honey was to Roman life. It wasn't just about sweetening food. Romans saw it as something far more vital, almost sacred. The bees were not just creatures of agriculture. They were part of the Roman gods' gifts, their wings fluttering with divine purpose. Beeswax was used to make sacred candles for temple offerings, ensuring the gods' light never went out. Honey was used to make mead, a drink so revered that it was often served at festivals and banquets in honor of the gods. The Romans knew that honey wasn't just food, it was a bridge between the divine and the earthly. As you observe the workers carefully tending to the hives, you feel a sense of awe at the quiet precision of their labor. Beekeepers weren't just harvesters of honey. They were artisans, handling their hives with the delicate care required to sustain the colony and ensure a successful harvest. The skill required to manage the hives was passed down from generation to generation. The ancient texts that survive, especially those from Virgil and Pliny the Elder, detail the proper techniques for maintaining healthy hives, understanding the bees' behavior, and ensuring that the harvest would be plentiful. A light joke flits through your mind. If only your own work required this much patience, careful, deliberate, with such an eye for detail. But the Romans understood that their success, not only in beekeeping, but in life, rested on a balance between working with nature and the divine, understanding the rhythms of the world and how they could align with their own. As the hives are gently cracked open, the rich golden liquid is harvested, its sweet smell rising into the air. You watch the workers take the honeycombs carefully, ensuring no bee is harmed during the process. The bees are as sacred as the honey they produce, and in Roman culture they are viewed with respect. Even the honeycomb, with its hexagonal perfection, was considered a symbol of order in the world, mathematical, geometric, and divine. The Romans saw in the bees a reflection of the empire itself, a highly organized, efficient, and productive society. The honey collected today will be used for a variety of purposes, some for religious offerings, some for medicinal purposes, and some for the feasts and banquets of the wealthy. You walk past a merchant's stall and see jars of honey, their golden contents gleaming in the sun. It's not just a food item, it's a symbol of Roman prosperity. From the lowliest farmer's table to the emperor's grand feast, honey binds Roman society together. It's a marker of the empire's reach, from the lush gardens of Italy to the desert sands of Egypt. The bees are not just vital to the daily life of Rome, they are essential to the spiritual and cultural identity of the empire. The hum of their wings, the sweetness of their honey, and the wax they produce are all intertwined in a complex web of trade culture and divine respect. In every Roman village, in every grand estate, the rhythm of beekeeping continues as it has for centuries. You stand here in awe of that continuity, understanding how deeply the bees are woven into the fabric of Roman civilization. A final light joke plays at the back of your mind. If only your day-to-day rituals were as steeped in reverence for nature's harmony, maybe everything would work a bit more smoothly. But you feel it now, the rhythm of the Roman way, where every action is part of a larger sacred dance between people, nature, and the gods. You step through the cool marble portico of a grand Roman temple as dawn's rosy light filters through soaring columns. The scent of incense mingles with lingering traces of beeswax, an aroma more sacred than any perfume. Before you, artisans arrange beeswax candles in elaborate candelabra, their golden hue catching glints of sunlight. These candles will burn through the night, guiding worshippers' prayers and illuminating the temple's interior until the next dawn. You probably won't survive a night in Rome without witnessing this ritual, yet here you stand feeling the gravity of centuries as flame meets wax. The pure beeswax used in temple flames was prized above all other substances. Mainstream sources note that Roman priests insisted on beeswax for temple candles because it burned cleanly and emitted a faint honeyed scent believed to please the gods and ward off corruption in the air. Wax candles, not tallow, became the standard for sacred spaces by the 1st century CE, ensuring rituals proceeded beneath flawless light. Historians still argue whether this preference arose solely from practical considerations, beeswax's higher melting point and minimal smoke, or from a deeper theological impulse assigning spiritual purity to bees' sacred product. As you approach the altar, an assistant hands you a slender taper carved from a single block of pure wax. You trace its smooth surface with a fingertip, feeling the hexagonal imprint where the comb once lay. A fringed tail drifts through the hushed chamber that a Roman pontifex once performed a secret rite, anointing candles with honey infused with night-blooming flowers beneath a full moon to grant visions of the gods. Though no contemporary account confirms this mystic practice, the story endures in whispered monastic chronicles. The head priest, draped in ivory-hemmed robes, raises his lit taper and lights a row of stacked beeswax candles set before a marble statue of Jupiter. Each flame blossoms instantly, casting dancing shadows across frescoed walls. The ritual's precision is mesmerizing. One candle lights 3 others in a rapid sequence, symbolizing the divine triad of Father Earth and Sky. Mainstream liturgical guides from the era emphasize that lighting must occur in strict numerical order, an innovation dating to Augustus's reign, so that the ritual's cosmic symbolism remained intact. You watch as the temple's mosaic floor glitters under the steady glow, the honey-yellow light reflecting patterns of laurel leaves and lares, household gods. Worshippers enter in silence, voices hushed, stepping into a world illuminated not by the sun, but by bees' quiet labor. A light joke flutters across your mind. If only your office meetings were lit so elegantly, you'd feel inspired rather than trapped in fluorescent glare. Beyond ritual use, Beeswax candles played vital roles in public ceremonies. On festival nights when Rome celebrated Lupercalia or Saturnalia, temples remained lit by thousands of wax candles, creating rivers of light through dark courtyards. Mainstream chronicles from the late Republic record that during Caesar's funeral, more than 50,000 candles lined the forum's colonnades, turning mourning into a luminous spectacle. Historians still debate whether those accounts exaggerated figures for dramatic effect or whether Roman engineers truly orchestrated such grand illuminations. You move to inspect the candle-making room, where slave laborers roll thin sheets of beeswax around twisted reeds to form tapers. Their motions are rhythmic peel press smooth, layer by layer, until each candle gleams. Observing their synchronized work, you sense a living metaphor, Rome itself built layer upon layer of order, each wax fold reinforcing collective strength. A fringe notion suggests that some temple workshops mixed wax from different hive regions, coastal bees, upland colonies, to blend subtle scent nuances, producing candles with distinct regional fragrances for different gods. While no chemical analysis survives, the idea sparks your imagination. Outside the temple, you glimpse merchants unloading crates of beeswax from Phoenician ships. Trade records note that Carthage's apiaries produced premium wax valued at twice the price of Egyptian imports, prized for its ivory hue and malleable texture. Mainstream evidence indicates that by the 2nd century CE, Roman trade routes extended wax acquisition across the Mediterranean, ensuring a steady supply for both sacred and secular needs. Historians still argue whether wax scarcity ever threatened temple rituals, or if state reserves always bridged supply gaps. Returning inside, you notice a side altar devoted to Vesta, goddess of the hearth and home. Here, the sacred flame must never die, a task entrusted to the Vestal virgins, who fed it exclusively with consecrated beeswax. According to ancient law, allowing that flame to waver was punishable by exile. Mainstream legal codes from the Justinian era codify these rules, reflecting an unbroken tradition that tethered political stability to a flame's continuity. Scholars still debate how often Vestal negligence led to actual penalties, given the goddess's paramount importance. You step into a shadowed corridor where retired Vestals store unlit candles for emergencies. Their rows of wax tapers line stone niches like silent sentinels. A light joke crosses your mind. If only your emergency kit contained beeswax candles instead of dusty flashlights, perhaps you'd feel more prepared during power outages. The temple's final evening ceremony begins. Priests bear tall candlesticks down an aisle, lighting smaller votive candles held by congregants. Each votive flame represents a personal prayer, a private petition merging with the communal glow. As the sanctuary fills with flickering light, the hush intensifies, broken only by whispered chants. You realize that beeswax candles are more than sources of illumination. They are vessels of devotion, each melted drop carrying human hope upward. You pause to reflect on the journey of wax, from hive to altar, from blind bees to conscious worshippers, and the interconnected cycle it represents. The bees gather nectar under sunlit skies. Farmers harvest comb with care. Artisans shape wax into candles, and priests transform flame into divine presence. Each link in this chain depends on the others, a testament to the Roman genius for integrating nature labor and belief. A final light joke drifts through your mind. If only your nightly routine began with lighting sacred candles, you'd sleep more peacefully than scrolling through notifications. Yet here in this temple the flame burns steady, a beacon of order, reverence, and the timeless bond between humanity and the humble bee. As the night deepens, you leave the warmth and glow of the temple behind, stepping into the cool, quiet streets of Rome. The city, alive with its usual hum, seems more tranquil now. The flickering lights from the honey-dripped candles in temples and villas cast a golden hue across the cobbled roads. You feel a sense of reverence for the bees, the creatures that have been central to Roman life, both in the sacred rituals of the gods and in the everyday needs of the people. The bees' silent labor has kept Rome lit, prosperous, and connected to the divine. Historians still argue whether the Roman fascination with bees had more to do with their practical uses or with their spiritual symbolism. Mainstream texts note that while bees were initially valued for their utility pollinating crops, producing honey for food and mead, and providing beeswax for candles, their divine associations grew over time. The Vestal Virgin's perpetual flame, the honey used in rituals, and the association of bees with Venus, goddess of love and beauty, transformed the humble bee into a symbol of divine order. You can't help but feel that the buzzing of bees represents more than just the hum of the city. It's the pulse of Rome itself, its divine connection to both heaven and earth. You continue walking through the streets, passing bustling markets where traders call out their wares, everything from wine to fresh honeycomb. The honey in these markets, though, not the fine beeswax candles you saw earlier, still has a place of importance. Roman street vendors offer honeycomb slabs, freshly harvested, their golden sweetness promising relief from a long day of work. Historians still argue about the best uses for honey in Roman society. Should it be consumed as a treat, used medicinally, or offered as a gift to the gods? The Romans seem to have found a way to use it for all these purposes, making honey one of the most versatile commodities of their time. You pass by a stall where a vendor has arranged jars of honey on a cloth. The sweet scent wafts toward you, mingling with the fresh morning bread and fragrant herbs nearby. You watch as an elderly Roman woman buys a jar, offering a prayer to the god Apis before she walks away. Apis, the god of bees, was often depicted as a sacred bull, and his association with beekeeping was both practical and spiritual. The Romans saw the buzzing of bees as a form of communication with the divine, a sign that the gods approved of their work and that their crops, their hives, and their lives were in harmony with the rhythms of the universe. A light joke floats through your mind. If only your grocery shopping included offerings to the gods of honey, before every purchase, your life might feel more balanced. But here in Rome, honey wasn't just a commodity. It was a part of life's sacred flow. The bees worked tirelessly, their labor woven into the fabric of Roman culture. The honey harvested was not just sweet. It was blessed with divine purpose, nourishing the people physically and spiritually. It was a small, yet constant reminder that everything in Roman life, every step, every market transaction, every meal was connected to the divine, to the rhythms of nature, and to the sacred bees that made it all possible. As you continue your walk, you begin to realize how central the bee's rhythm was to everything around you. The beekeeping practices, the candles in the temples, the honey on the table, it all formed a delicate, continuous cycle. The Romans didn't just take from nature. They gave back, offering reverence and thanks to the bees that made their lives sweet. The buzz of the bees was not just a sound, it was the heartbeat of Rome itself, woven into the empire's soul. A final light joke arises. If only your own routine could carry such purpose, each act a ritual, each moment a beat in the song of life. But here you begin to see that the Roman Empire's success wasn't just in its conquest of lands, it was in its understanding of how to live in harmony with the rhythms of the earth, the gods, and the bees. The faint glow of street lamps flickers in the distance as you find yourself walking toward the great marketplace of Rome. It's a space teeming with activity. Roman merchants shout their wares, voices overlapping with the rhythmic beat of metal, striking metal, the hum of fabric being woven, and the occasional clink of coins exchanged for goods. But amidst all this noise, there's a quiet undercurrent, an almost imperceptible hum that links it all together. You realize it's the hum of the bees still buzzing in the hives, silently contributing to the city's vibrancy, even in this busy commercial hub. Historians still argue whether Roman marketplaces would have operated as efficiently without the steady flow of honey and beeswax, which fueled so much of the Roman economy. Mainstream sources highlight how beeswax was essential not only in the creation of candles, but also in the manufacture of cosmetics, medicines, and coatings for ships. The Romans, with their boundless ingenuity, applied beeswax to everything from their military equipment to their art, using it in the construction of sculptures and preserving frescoes. But as significant as these practical uses were, it was honey's medicinal properties that truly made it indispensable in the Roman world. You walk past a group of Roman apothecaries who are hawking their wares, potion bottles, jars of ointments, and scrolls of instructions for various remedies. One apothecary approaches you holding up a small jar of honey mixed with herbs. He explains how honey was used to treat everything from sore throats to wounds, its natural antiseptic properties widely praised in Roman medicine. Honey was considered a gift from the gods, often used in rituals to ensure healing and longevity. You realize that even as the Romans pursued greatness on the battlefield and in governance, they didn't forget the healing powers of nature embodied in the humble bee. A fringe theory suggests that Roman physicians also used honey in their embalming processes, preserving bodies with honey-infused ointments to ward off decay. While this practice is still debated among archaeologists, it is clear that honey held an almost sacred status in Roman medicine and healing. In fact, Roman soldiers, after long marches and battles, often carried small packets of honey in their kits, knowing that its healing powers would help soothe wounds and fatigue. You pause for a moment, considering the reach of Roman beekeeping. From the temples to the apothecaries, honey and beeswax were woven into every aspect of Roman life, elevating the simple act of beekeeping into something far greater. It wasn't just about producing honey. It was about cultivating a connection to nature, to the divine, and to the people around them. The bees were the silent workers, the unseen contributors, yet their presence permeated every facet of Roman society. As you move through the bustling market, you hear the rhythmic clink of coins being exchanged for honey. Merchants offer their wares displaying jars of amber gold, each one a small treasure, the product of thousands of tiny, diligent bees. The honey in these jars is not just a commodity, it's a symbol of wealth, health, and prosperity. The value placed on it is a testament to its essential role in Roman society. Without bees, without their tireless labor, the Roman world would not have been the same. A light joke drifts through your mind. If only the world were as simple as exchanging honey for goods where everything had such clear value. But here in the Roman marketplace, honey was more than just currency. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between human ingenuity and nature's unyielding rhythms. The bees working silently in their hives were the unseen force that made it all possible. You move on through the marketplace, feeling the weight of the history around you. Honey beeswax and their many uses have been part of this empire for centuries. From the sacred altars to the practical shelves of apothecaries, from the army camps to the banquets of emperors, the bees have been with the Romans every step of the way. And as you leave the marketplace behind you, can't help but carry the quiet hum of the bees with you, a reminder of their hidden but vital role in Rome's past and of the connection between humans and nature that continues to this day. You slip away from the marketplace's clamor into a quieter courtyard shaded by olive trees, where a small group of Roman physicians has gathered around a wooden table. Before them lie vials of honey bowls of crushed herbs and a curious assortment of curved instruments, bee stingers affixed to bronze handles. This is the arena of bee venom therapy, a practice as sharp as it is healing. You probably won't survive a sting yourself, but here, under the careful hands of a medicus, those same stings are wielded like scalpels, tiny, precise, and full of purpose. Historians still argue whether Romans learned apitherapy directly from earlier cultures, perhaps the Egyptians or Greeks, or if they developed it independently, spurred by trial and error in their own hive-rich landscapes. Mainstream medical texts, notably those of Galen, record how bee venom was applied to inflamed joints and muscle aches, believed to draw out humoral excesses that caused pain. According to Galen, a controlled sting could reduce swelling and restore harmony to the body's inner balance. You watch as a veteran apiarist physician selects a mature drone, isolates it with a loop of fine linen, and positions it gently against a patient's swollen knee. A single sting punctures the skin, a sharp electric sensation that draws a gasp. The patient winces, then breathes deeply as the venom begins its work. Within minutes, the redness softens, and the joint's tightness eases, replaced by a soothing warmth. A fringed tale claims that some Roman nobles routinely received bee stings to maintain eternal vigor, their physicians carrying portable hives on imperial travels. While no direct diary survives, the rumor lingers in dusty villa libraries. A light joke flits through your mind. If only your dentist offered honeybee stings instead of Novocaine, maybe you'd skip the jitters and buzz your way through cleanings. But in Rome, the sting was a badge of trust. The patient surrendered control, believing that nature's tiny weapon could heal as effectively as any herb or stone. Nearby, an assistant carefully extracts venom by allowing bees to sting a leather-lined cup, collecting droplets that glisten like morning dew. The venom is then mixed with honey to create a salve mellitum, which patients apply to wounds and arthritic limbs. Mainstream accounts laud honey's natural antiseptic properties and the venom's anti-inflammatory effects. Together, they form a dual-action remedy. Yet, some scholars still argue whether the venom's benefits stem from its actual compounds or from a powerful placebo effect. Rooted in Roman faith in their gods and healers, you observe the patient rubbing the warm golden salve into his elbow crease, murmuring a prayer to Aesculapius, god of medicine. The air is fragrant with basil and laurel, each herb chosen for its own healing virtues. Roman healers believed that when combined with bee venom, these herbs amplified the body's natural restorative powers, guiding vital spirits back to equilibrium. A fringe notion whispers that certain apiarist physicians could adjust venom potency by altering bees' diets, feeding them pollen from healing plants such as hypericum or rue to tint their venom with extra medicinal power. Skeptics dismiss this as fanciful, yet you can't help but marvel at the creativity of such experimental techniques. As the afternoon sun filters through latticework, you note the precise record-keeping, each treatment's time-bee species, sting location, and patient's pulse. Romans prided themselves on data, and epitherapy was no exception. Tablets inscribed with details from hives across Latium and Campania formed an early pharmacopoeia guiding physicians in tailoring treatments. Historians still argue over how standardized these records were given the empire's vast expanse and the era's travel limitations. You probably won't survive another minute without picturing the scene, sunlight dancing on the physician's bronze instruments, the patient's relieved smile, the distant hum of 1,000 bees in nearby hives. This was medicine built on observation, fearlessness, and respect for nature's smallest warriors. A light joke crosses your mind. If only your modern healthcare came with as much direct engagement bee buzz instead of beeping monitors, you might feel more alive than anxious. You stand and step away, leaving the courtyard bathed in honeyed light. The patient flexes his fingers, marveling at newfound ease. Around you, bees drift homeward, their day's work echoing the healer's mission to bring balance, sensation, and life. In Rome's grand tapestry, these tiny creatures carried the weight of both physical relief and spiritual symbolism, weaving a legacy as sticky and enduring as their golden honey. You leave the courtyard and find yourself walking along the bustling streets of Rome, the weight of the city's heartbeat now syncing with your own. The sounds of commerce chatter and the occasional clink of coins in the market are everywhere, but the constant hum of the bees, their unseen labor is still present, echoing in the back of your mind. It's as if every step, every moment in this city is somehow connected to the steady rhythm of beekeeping, a rhythm that reaches from the rural farmsteads to the very heart of the empire. Historians still argue whether Rome's reliance on bees was a reflection of their broader relationship with nature, or a necessity born from their vast empire's needs. Mainstream historical analysis suggests that the Romans saw bees as a symbol of order and prosperity, closely tied to their agricultural roots and their efforts to sustain a growing empire. In fact, bees were considered so important that the Roman Senate passed laws requiring the careful management of apiaries to ensure stable production of honey and beeswax, making beekeeping a protected practice. The Romans understood that their empire's growth was not only based on military conquest, but also on the delicate balance of resources, and the bees played a part in that balance. As you walk deeper into the city, you encounter a wealthy merchant selling jars of honey from a small stand. The honey glows amber and rich, its fragrance faint but sweet, drawing you closer. You're reminded of how honey was more than just a sweet treat for the Romans. It was a commodity with deep economic value. It wasn't just for eating. Honey was used in mead, a fermented beverage highly popular among the Roman elite, and it was a critical ingredient in the making of perfumes, ointments, and cosmetics. This multi-use value of honey made it a symbol of Roman ingenuity and their ability to turn natural resources into valuable goods. A light joke floats into your mind: if only your grocery shopping involved honey that could double as currency. But the reality of Roman life was far more intertwined with nature's bounty. The trade in honey wax and mead helped fuel the Roman economy. In fact, some scholars suggest that honey was used as an early form of payment for workers, particularly in rural areas where bartering goods was more common than using coinage. This direct exchange, a transaction of sweet labor for sweet rewards, was the lifeblood of Roman agricultural prosperity. As you watch the merchant offer samples, a few coins exchange hands for jars of honey, and you realize that this practice is as old as the empire itself. The same system of trade that allowed for the thriving marketplace of Rome also relied heavily on natural resources like bees and honey to keep the economy flowing. The humble bee, with its tireless work ethic, was at the very heart of this system. You can't help but marvel at the profound interconnectedness. The trade in honey was not just about food or profit, it was about sustaining a civilization. As you move on, you pass a noble estate where workers carefully transport a large hive in a wooden cart, moving it toward the orchards. The gentle hum of the bees from within the hive is a quiet reminder of the labor that goes into ensuring the vitality of the empire's crops. The bees, unnoticed by most, are the unsung heroes of Rome's agricultural success. Their pollination keeps the vineyards, orchards, and fields fertile, providing the Roman tables with grapes, figs, and wheat. The rhythmic buzz of the bees is not just the sound of industry, it's the sound of sustenance, of survival. A fringe thought drifts into your mind. Maybe this is why the Romans held the bees in such high regard. They were not just workers, they were guardians of prosperity, protectors of the future. The bees, with their cyclical labor, mirrored the rhythms of Roman life itself, constant, industrious, and essential. You reach the edge of the estate where the bees seem to gather in the air around you, drawn to the hives where they'll continue their work. The hum of their wings becomes almost meditative, a soft, continuous pulse that echoes the heartbeat of the empire. You realize that you have been walking in sync with their rhythm all along, moving through the streets and the markets, the temples and the estates, all in a constant dance with the world around you. The Romans knew how to live in harmony with that rhythm, how to listen to it, understand it, and build their empire upon it. A final light joke flits through your mind: if only you could walk through your life as effortlessly as the bees, moving from task to task with purpose and grace. But here you understand that the key to their success wasn't just in their labor, it was in their understanding of the natural rhythms that governed their world and their ability to move with those rhythms, not against them. You continue walking through the streets of Rome, the cool evening air now settling around you As the city transitions from its bustling daytime energy to a quieter, more contemplative night, the sounds of the market gradually fade, and the light from the street lamps cast long shadows across the cobblestones. As you make your way toward the banks of the Tiber River, you find yourself reflecting on the centrality of honey and beekeeping in Roman society. It's clear now that the relationship between the Romans and their bees was not just utilitarian, but symbolic, deeply intertwined with their spiritual, medicinal, and economic practices. Historians still argue over the level of reverence the Romans had for their bees, while some mainstream scholars emphasize the role of bees in agriculture. Others highlight the spiritual and symbolic importance of bees in Roman culture. The belief in the divine nature of the bees is rooted in their role as messengers, carriers of the gods' blessings and powers. Some sources suggest that the Romans believed bees were a gift from the gods, a belief that is reinforced by their association with deities like Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. Bees were seen as symbols of purity and order, and their work in the hive was thought to mirror the organized, disciplined life the Romans strove to maintain. You probably won't survive the night without considering how honey and beeswax have crossed from the divine to the practical in Roman society. As you pass by a small shrine to Venus, adorned with garlands of flowers and honeycombs, you see that even here, in the spaces devoted to worship, the symbolism of the bee is present. The Romans didn't just see bees as a source of material wealth. They were sacred creatures, their labor a divine reflection of the order and prosperity that Rome sought to embody. A light joke floats through your mind. If only the bees could run for office. Perhaps they would have ensured Rome's prosperity without all the political drama. But the truth is, the bees' work was integral to Roman life, so much so that their presence in both religious and secular spaces was a constant reminder of the balance the Romans sought with nature, divinity, and productivity. As you continue walking, you reach the banks of the Tiber River, where the quiet lapping of the water seems to mirror the hum of the bees. The city of Rome is spread out before you, a marvel of engineering and civilization. But beneath it all lies the natural rhythm of the world, a pulse that connects everything. The river itself, once a vital lifeblood of the empire, is like the flow of time, constant and unyielding, yet shaped by the hands of those who understand its rhythm. You take a moment to sit by the riverbank, gazing at the reflections of the city's bridges and buildings shimmering in the water. The sky has deepened into a velvet blue, and the stars begin to twinkle overhead, their steady rhythm joining the hum of the city and the flow of the river. For a brief moment, you feel at peace with the world around you, understanding that the rhythm of life in Rome, just like the rhythm of the bees, was always about balance, moving with the flow of time and nature rather than forcing it. A fringe thought rises within you. Maybe this is the key to Roman success. They didn't conquer the world by overpowering the natural world or ignoring its rhythms. They worked with it, moving in harmony with the forces that shaped the empire. They understood that the bee's work wasn't just about honey or wax. It was about maintaining a delicate balance between nature's civilization and the divine. Perhaps if the modern world could learn to listen to the rhythms of the earth, as the Romans did, we too would find a way to live more harmoniously with the world around us. A final light joke flits through your mind. If only you could sink your entire life to the rhythm of the Tiber's flow, maybe you'd never feel rushed again. But here at the edge of the river, with the moon casting its soft light across the water, you begin to understand the deeper wisdom of the Romans. Life isn't about controlling time or nature. It's about learning to move with it, like the river, like the bees, like the empire that understood the power of balance. As the moon casts its silver glow across the Tiber River, you feel a deeper connection to the land, the city, and the ancient rhythms that have shaped Rome. The gentle hum of the bees, the careful work of the beekeepers, and the city's bustling marketplace all seem to be woven together into a symphony of life. Everything, it seems, operates in harmony, and this realization settles over you like a soothing balm. The Romans, it seems, understood something fundamental, that life, like their beekeeping, was not something to control, but something to move with. Time was a rhythm to be followed, not a series of isolated moments to be conquered. Historians still argue whether the Romans fully understood the interconnectedness of all life forms, or if their reverence for nature was rooted more in religious symbolism than ecological awareness. Mainstream sources suggest that Roman society did indeed recognize the cycles of nature, and their careful cultivation of bees, agriculture, and other resources reflected this understanding. The precise care with which they handled their hives, the rituals they performed, and the reverence they held for the bees all point to an innate knowledge of the balance between man and nature. You probably won't survive a day in Rome without realizing how deeply the bees were woven into every aspect of life here. Their buzzing presence was felt in the fields, the temples, the homes, and the markets. They were as essential to Roman life as any other creature, and their labor was seen as sacred, an extension of the divine rhythm that guided the universe. The honey they produced was not just a commodity. It was a gift from the gods, nourishing both the body and the soul. The beeswax, too, played its part, lighting the way for both the living and the dead, illuminating temples and sanctuaries as a symbol of divine presence. A light joke pops into your mind. If only modern life valued bees as much as the Romans did, perhaps we wouldn't have so many problems. Imagine a world where we treat every small act of labor with reverence, where even the humble bee is seen as sacred, where balance and harmony are not just ideals, but ways of life. But here in this moment you realize that the Romans didn't just revere the bees. They understood that they were part of a larger cosmic system. one that depended on balance, on working with nature rather than forcing it. You stand up feeling the cool breeze from the river wash over you and begin walking back toward the heart of the city. The Roman streets are quieter now, the light from the torches casting a soft glow on the cobblestones. You reflect on all that you've learned about Roman beekeeping, the quiet power of the bees, and how they were so deeply integrated into the fabric of Roman life. Honeybees' wax, and even the bees themselves, were sacred. The bees were more than just workers. They were the divine messengers of prosperity and fertility. Their hum, a reminder that life flows in cycles, always moving, always changing, but always in harmony. A fringe thought surfaces, perhaps. The key to the Roman success wasn't just their engineering or their military might, but their understanding of life's rhythms, their ability to listen, to observe, and to work in harmony with nature. In a world so often driven by the urgency of time, the Romans offer a quiet but powerful lesson. To find success, we need not fight against the flow of time, but learn to move with it, like the bees, like the river, and like the city itself. You smile to yourself, thinking that if only your daily routine had a little more of this balance, perhaps everything would feel as seamless as the rhythmic hum of the bees. But for now, in the quiet of Rome, you have learned a valuable truth. Life's greatest rhythms are not imposed. They are discovered, felt, and lived in harmony with nature, time, and the divine. You take your seat among a semicircle of magistrates and local landowners in the marbled hall of the town council, your toga's folds rustling softly as servants pour out small amphorae of wine. The air is thick with heated debate. Honey jars gleam atop a wooden table, testaments to the wealth of the hive, while scrolls document beeswax deliveries to the temple. You probably won't survive this without knowing the stakes: honey and wax fund, public works, fund panem, exercences, and by extension, your own civic duties. Tonight, you're here to argue over the honey tax, a levy that could sweeten the city's coffers or sour the beekeepers' livelihoods. Let us not sting our farmers into poverty, one elderly decurion pleads, voice wavering like a tired bee's buzz. Historians still argue whether honey taxation was first codified under the early Republic or emerged later under Augustus, but mainstream records confirm a formal tributum mellis by the 2nd century BCE. This levy, typically 2 sextarii of honey per hive, annually filled municipal granaries and wax stores alike. Proponents claim it funds grain doles, road repairs, and even gladiatorial games. Opponents counter that excessive levies drive apiaries to ruin. You lift your gaze to the consul's bench, noting the flicker of torchlight on carved marble. A fringed tale drifts through whispered side conversations that one praetor imposed a 50% honey tax to pay for personal birthday festivities, only to be exiled when beekeepers retaliated by letting swarms roam the forum, honey dripping from stone steps for weeks. While no official annals record this prank, the story persists in tavern banter, illustrating the stakes of tonight's vote. The chief assessor, a lean man with hawk-like eyes, unfurls a map of the countryside. He traces apiary locations from urban rooftops to rural hillsides, each skep marked in charcoal. A modest levy, he says. Tapping a hive symbol yields enough honey to supply 50 temple lamps. Consider the incense, the public banquets. It all flows from these hives. His finger glides to a cluster of wild hives in the Monte Sabini. Yet our records show dwindling yields where tax burdens exceed 2 amphorae. Historians still argue whether that decline stemmed from over-harvesting or more likely from excessive levies discouraging maintenance. You probably won't survive another minute without weighing in, so you clear your throat. Fellow magistrates, you begin voice calm as honey itself. Let us remember the bees' labor before we demand their bounty. A levy, too, sweetens temptation to neglect hives, to let them fall to decay. Instead, we should offer incentives, tax reductions, for those who expand their hives, reward those who share wax for civic projects. You gesture to a ledger page illustrating hive counts rising where taxes dipped. This isn't mere theory. It's documented in the census of the Flaminian district just last year. A chorus of nods greets your words. Yet a rival counselor, draped in a purple-trimmed toga, raises an elaborate scroll. You speak of incentives, but incentives don't build aqueducts, he retorts, voice sharp as a stinger. We need revenue now, not promises of future hives. The grain shortages last winter. Who paid for that? Who fed the plebs? His finger jabs at your chest. We tax what we have. Honey is plentiful. Let it flow into our coffers. You suppress a smile. A light joke buzzes in your head. If only modern politicians settled budgets by checking their pantries. Instead, you offer a compromise, a graduated tax, 1 sextarius per hive for the first 5 too, for hives 6 to 10, with exemptions for new apiaries established this year. This structure, you explain, recognizes growing beekeepers and encourages expansion. Revenues remain stable while future yields, and thus future taxes, rise organically. The assessment clerk rubs his chin thoughtfully, consulting his calculations on wax-smeared papyrus. An elegant solution, he concedes. It balances immediate needs with long-term viability. Historical records from Campania show similar models, cutting tax delinquency by 1/3. Yet he cautions that implementing brackets demands more administrative overhead, a valid concern in any era. A fringe notion surfaces from the back that certain beekeeping guilds once bribed assessors with jars of rare time honey to secure lower rates. No legal evidence supports this claim beyond a handful of disgruntled beekeepers' complaints. Yet the whisper underlines the human element behind every tax code. You glance around. Some counselors exchange knowing looks, suggesting the rumor may sting too close to truth. You probably won't survive another sip of this wine without proposing procedural safeguards. Let us appoint a rotating panel of beekeepers to oversee assessments you suggest. Their expertise ensures fair valuations, and their representation guards against corruption. Mainstream legal scholars in Corinth recommend such panels in olive oil levies, and it's time Rome adopted similar measures. A lighter moment flickers as a scribe accidentally knocks over a small jar of honey, splattering amber across the marble floor. A senator quips, "Perhaps the bees themselves protest our deliberations." Laughter ripples through the assembly, easing tension, before the consul wraps his staff, an ornate bronze bee calling for order. With spirits lifted, you sense momentum shifting toward your proposal. The timing feels right. The oil lamps need refilling. Circus tickets await financing, and the public grain store hums with expectant crowds. You watch the counselors whisper among themselves, weighing authority against sustainability. Finally, the consul stands. He pronounces the compromise in measured tones at a graduated honey tax assessment. Panels, including beekeepers and a census of hives, every 2 years. The decree carries a consensus glow, an echo of the bees' own collaborative spirit. May this levy honor the bees' labor and secure our city's prosperity, he intones. Scrolls are unrolled signatures affixed and wax seals pressed. You rise a sense of accomplishment, warming you more than any wine. As you exit the hall, torchlight flickers off the marble, and you feel the distant hum of debate giving way to the softer buzz of Rome's bees. They rest now, emboldened by their protected status, ready to rise with dawn and deliver their golden bounty. A final light joke flutters in your mind. If only all politics could be as sweet and structured as honey. Perhaps then we'd all rest more easily. As you step into the cool evening air, the streets of Rome feel quieter now, a stark contrast to the earlier debates in the council hall. The weight of the day's decision lingers in the back of your mind. You've just helped shape the future of Roman beekeeping and perhaps, in some small way, the future of Rome itself. The sounds of the city still echo, but the underlying hum you now hear is the subtle buzz of thousands of hives across the empire, their tireless work continuing into the night, producing the honey that sustains everything. Historians still debate whether the Romans truly understood the economic and ecological importance of bees, or if their reverence for these creatures was rooted more in superstition and tradition than in scientific insight. Some mainstream scholars argue that while Roman society revered bees for their product, it wasn't until the later Middle Ages that beekeeping truly became a scientific practice. Others suggest that the Romans, with their meticulous records and deep connections to the natural world, had a far more sophisticated understanding of bees than is often credited. You probably won't survive the night without feeling a deep sense of awe at how central the bee has been to Rome's success, not just in food, medicine, and economy, but in the deeper spiritual and symbolic roles they played. The bee wasn't merely a worker, it was a sacred creature, a symbol of order and divine harmony. In the flickering torchlight, you can almost hear the distant buzz of the hives echoing through time, from the ancient Roman streets to the quiet corners of modern life. A light joke rises in your mind. If only our modern cities could function with the same level of quiet efficiency as a beehive, maybe we'd all move through life a little more gracefully. But here in Rome, the power of the bee's quiet labor is undeniable. Every drop of honey, every piece of beeswax is a product of an intricate system that mirrors the very rhythms of Roman society. The interconnectedness between man-nature and the divine, encapsulated in the humble bee, was more than just a matter of convenience. It was essential to the empire's survival. As you continue walking through the streets, you can't help but marvel at the legacy that the Roman respect for bees left behind. The bee's role wasn't just in sustaining Rome's economy, but in shaping its culture, its spirituality, and even its identity. The sacred rituals, the honey used in healing the wax that lit the temples, all of it played into the broader narrative of Roman life, weaving a story that connected every Roman, every citizen, to the divine cycle of nature. In that, the Romans truly understood something fundamental, that the rhythms of nature symbolized by the bee are the rhythms that guide us all. A final light joke enters your thoughts. If only modern life had a little more honey and beeswax to go around, maybe we'd all find a way to work in harmony. But for now, you smile, knowing that the Romans found their harmony centuries ago in the buzz of their bees. And in this moment you feel connected to that ancient rhythm, moving with the flow of time, just as the bees have always done. The next morning arrives with a golden haze as the city awakens. The sounds of Rome's early bustle are accompanied by the gentle hum of bees, an ever-present reminder of their quiet but critical role in the empire's daily life. You find yourself walking through the grand Villa Borghese, a lush garden filled with towering trees and winding pathways, all cultivated to perfection. Alongside the birds, flowers, and fountains, the bees make their presence known, their wings a soft symphony that fills the space. Here, amid the beauty of nature and human design, you pause to reflect on the deeper connection between the two. Historians still argue whether the relationship between Roman society and nature was rooted in an understanding of ecology or simply a series of practical adaptations to the natural world. Mainstream scholars suggest that Romans, much like the Greeks before them, practiced a form of symbiosis with nature, where human ingenuity, particularly in agriculture and beekeeping, helped tame the wild while respecting its power. You can feel this balance in the air around you, the perfect blend of nature's untamed rhythms and Rome's methodical progress. You probably won't survive without stopping to admire the precision with which this natural world has been sculpted. In the gardens around you, you see evidence of Roman landscape architecture at its finest. Hedges trimmed to perfection, water channels directing life-giving moisture, and carefully curated spaces for reflection and leisure. Yet, as you look closer, you notice the constant motion of bees moving from flower to flower, their tiny bodies heavy with pollen. These small creatures are the unnoticed workers in the garden's grand design, just as they were in the empire. Their work, though often invisible to the eye, supports the very systems that allow Roman gardens, and indeed Roman life, to flourish. A light joke flits through your mind. If only your morning routine had the precision and elegance of a Roman garden, where every element is perfectly in tune with nature's cycle. But here, in the villa's peaceful garden, you feel what the Romans knew to be true, that success is found in harmony, not force. The Roman understanding of nature wasn't about domination, but cooperation, a collaboration with the earth's natural rhythms, where humans, bees, and plants all play their part. As you walk along a well-worn path, you come across a beehive carefully tucked into the corner of a marble garden bench. The hive is constructed with the same care and attention that went into every aspect of Roman life. Its placement here among the flowers and the trees is a reminder that the bees were never merely guests in the gardens of Rome. They were essential partners, just as the bees pollinated the flowers, ensuring the growth of crops and gardens. They also provided the sweet nectar that sustained Rome's markets, rituals, and families. The bees, in their quiet labor, made life in Rome possible, connecting the sacred with the mundane, the natural with the constructed. Historians still debate whether Roman beekeeping evolved primarily for agricultural or religious reasons, but there's no doubt that both were deeply intertwined. Mainstream thought holds that bees were seen not just as beneficial workers, but as sacred creatures associated with deities like Venus and Apis, the god of fertility. These divine connections elevated bees beyond their practical value, transforming them into symbols of prosperity, harmony, and divine order. The Romans, in their reverence for these creatures, understood something fundamental about the natural world, that even the smallest being can carry the weight of the divine. You smile to yourself, reflecting on the ways in which bees have shaped the legacy of Rome. It wasn't just the grandeur of their architecture or the might of their military that made Rome great. It was their understanding of nature, of cycles, and of how to live in balance with the world around them. The bees, with their industriousness and their quiet hum, are as much a part of Rome's history as the legions and the emperors. A light joke plays in your mind. If only modern life could find the same balance between nature and progress, we might all thrive as Rome did. But for now, as you sit in the garden surrounded by the constant buzz of bees, you understand that the true secret of Rome's success lay not in its conquests, but in its ability to work with the rhythms of nature, like the bees themselves. You step through the crumbling archway of a once grand Roman villa, its marble columns now cracked and overgrown with ivy. The silence here feels profound, broken only by the distant chirp of cicadas and the soft drone of bees weaving in and out of collapsed walls. You probably won't survive another day in Rome without witnessing how nature reclaims man-made marvels. Yet here you stand, awed by the sight of wild hives, nestled in the villa's ruins, colonies of bees, thriving where patricians once strolled. Scholars still argue whether these feral colonies represent mere survival or a deliberate practice by Romans to encourage wild swarms as a form of free-range beekeeping. Mainstream archaeological studies confirm that abandoned structures across Latium and Campania often hosted wild hives centuries after human occupation ended, their hardy descendants pollinating wild flowers and vines among fallen mosaics. Yet some field researchers posit a fringe idea that strategic abandonment of villas, known as Villa Silva, was an intentional method to seed new apiaries, harnessing wild swarms for fresh honey production without tending each hive. You weave carefully through toppled masonry, stepping over mosaic fragments depicting mythic scenes of Bacchus and Ceres. Somewhere above, bees dive into colorful blossoms, sprouting from cracks in terracotta tiles. Their hum reverberates through empty chambers, echoing like a living memory of the villa's past grandeur. A light joke flitters through your mind. If only your workplace meetings left behind such productive remnants, you'd welcome empty offices for the bees. A mainstream botanical survey notes that these ruins often harbor lavender, thyme, and oregano herbs, valued by Romans for both cooking and medicinal infusions, thriving in sunlit courtyards. The bees, in turn, gather pollen and nectar, crafting honey with distinct herbal notes. Historians still argue whether villa owners ever sought out specific wild floral zones when constructing estates, selecting sites not just for views, but for future honey terroir. You pause by a collapsed portico where a massive hive hangs like an amber stalactite. Its wax combs spill from fissures in the stone, glistening in shafts of sunlight. The colony's population dwarfs any managed apiary you've seen. Scout bees patrol the air like diligent guards. A fringe rumor claims these ruin hives produced honey so potent that Roman generals gifted jars to their legions as morale boosters, believing its wild flavor conferred bravery. No military records confirm this tale, yet the legend endures in vineyards near Vesuvius, passed through grape-stained lips. You lean closer to the hive's entrance, sensing the hive's micro-ecosystem, the heat of thousands of buzzing bodies, the scent of wax and pollen intertwining with musty stone. A scholarly debate simmers. Did Romans cultivate wild hives by intentionally abandoning structures, or were these feral colonies merely opportunistic survivors exploiting neglected architecture? Some anthropologists argue for the former, citing instructions in lost treatises referenced by Pliny. Others insist no textual evidence exists. You trace your finger along an exposed comb, noting the irregular hexagons, wider than those in managed skeps, suggesting a different construction style, perhaps adapted to thicker, older walls. The bee's ingenuity fascinates you, even without human guidance. They replicate their social order, building comb to suit the environment. This wild craftsmanship echoes the broader theme of nature's resilience. A soft breeze stirs the overgrowth, rustling leaves above your head. Nearby, you spot a patch of wild rosemary blooming against a fallen fresco, its purple flowers bright against crumbling plaster. You pluck a sprig and inhale its crisp aroma, hints at flavor notes in the wild honey below. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. If only your morning tea came infused with the thrill of exploring ancient ruins, you'd never snooze your alarm. The villa's central atrium lies open to the sky, sunken and filled with soil. Here, dozens of smaller, irregular hives cling to broken statues and vine-wrapped pillars. The scene resembles a miniature forest, buzzing with life amid decay. You crouch to observe a pair of bees engaging in a waggle dance on a stone pedestal, communicating directions to uncharted flowers beyond the villa walls. Their precision rivals any street map, guiding fellow foragers to nectar amidst wild meadows. Mainstream entomologists note that feral colonies often exhibit greater genetic diversity than managed hives, lending them robustness against disease and harsh winters. Historians still argue whether Romans observed this resilience and deliberately fostered wild swarms to reinforce managed apiaries. Anecdotes in agricultural epilogues hint at collecting swarms from ruins to boost production in new hives, but direct evidence is scant. You rise and wander toward the villa's periphery, where an ancient mosaic floor remains partly intact, depicting plump bees around a honeycomb. The artistry suggests the Romans celebrated bees not just as laborers, but as cultural icons, worthy of memorial in stone. A fringe belief claims that villa owners commissioned such mosaics to honor guardian spirits of the hives, ensuring bees would return year after year. While mythic in nature, the imagery underscores bees' revered status. You step back into the dappled shade of cypresses, the hive's hum receding behind you. Despite centuries of neglect, the villa's wild inhabitants thrive, a testament to nature's enduring pulse. You probably won't survive another exploration without marveling at this fusion of decay and lifestone and swarm art and instinct. As you exit through the ivy-choked gate, the ruins fall silent once more, but the memory of their buzzing inhabitants lingers. You carry with you an image of colony resilience and the Romans' subtle interplay with wild hives, an echo of how even abandoned splendor can give rise to new life. The day draws to a close as you leave the villa ruins behind, stepping back into the bustling Roman city. The streets are quieter now, with the last of the merchants packing up their goods for the evening. The hum of bees, ever present in the background, seems to follow you, an echo of the connection between the wild and the cultivated, between nature and civilization. The rhythmic beat of the bees, so integral to Roman life, continues its work, unbidden but necessary. Historians still debate the influence of Roman beekeeping on later European traditions, with some suggesting that the collapse of the empire led to the loss of many ancient beekeeping techniques. Mainstream research indicates that much of the knowledge was preserved through medieval monastic communities who adopted and expanded upon Roman methods, bringing beekeeping back to prominence in the post-Roman world. Yet, there's a fringe theory that suggests the Romans themselves passed down beekeeping knowledge through their local guilds who safeguarded the sacred practices long after the empire fell. You probably won't survive a day without realizing how interconnected bees were to the very essence of Roman identity. They weren't just products of the fields or tools for economic growth. They were part of the spiritual fabric of the empire. The symbolism of the bee, a creature that worked silently and tirelessly, mirrored the very ideals of Roman society, order, discipline, and collaboration. They were seen not just as insects, but as sacred workers, keeping both the land and the people in balance. A light joke bubbles up. If only your workdays could be as seamless and productive as the bees' tireless work, weaving together nature's bounty. Yet it's clear now that the key to the Roman success wasn't their ability to control the world around them, but their understanding of how to work with it. The bees weren't enslaved to their labor. They thrived because their natural rhythm was respected, just as the Romans thrived because they respected the balance of nature. As you make your way back to the heart of the city, the sounds of the busy streets seem more distant now. The gentle buzzing of the bees, a steady, almost meditative hum, seems to follow you, a reminder of the ever-present connection between Rome and the natural world. From the grand temples to the quiet gardens, from the bustling markets to the villas abandoned to nature's reclamation, the rhythm of the bees is always there, a constant thread that weaves through the tapestry of Roman life. The legacy of the bees, you realize, is not just about honey or wax, but about the deeper understanding that the Romans had of their place within the world. They knew that their empire's prosperity wasn't just about military might or political control. It was about living in harmony with the natural world, respecting the cycles of nature, and understanding that every part of life, no matter how small, played a role in the grand scheme of things. The bees, with their tireless work and quiet presence, were a reminder of that profound wisdom. You pause for a moment, gazing out over the city as the last rays of the sun fade. The streets are filled with the bustle of Roman life, but beneath it all, you can hear the hum of the bees quietly working, ensuring that the empire continues to thrive. And in that moment, you feel connected to something much larger than yourself, the timeless rhythm of life, the buzz of the bees, and the deep wisdom of the Romans. A final light joke flutters through your mind. If only life could always be as simple and balanced as the work of a bee. But perhaps that is the very lesson the Romans left behind, that life, when lived in harmony with nature and its rhythms, is not about striving for perfection, but learning to move with the flow of time and the cycles that sustain us all. You wander into the grand reading room of a Roman villa where rows of dusty scrolls line marble benches, and the afternoon sun filters through high windows, scattering patterns of light on mosaic floors. At the center stands a weathered lectern displaying the latest copy of Virgil's Georgics, its pages inscribed with verdant visions of pastoral life and, most memorably, bees. You probably won't survive this without feeling your heart stir at the first honey-driven metaphor. But here you are, leaning in close as the golden words take flight. You unfurl the scroll to Book 4, the famed hymn to the bee. Virgil invokes the industrious creature with reverence. O bee, sweet messenger of flowers, whose golden gift sweetens earth's gifts and glows like melted amber. Historians still argue whether Virgil's admiration sprang from direct experience among Apulian hives, or if he borrowed lyrical tropes from Greek predecessors. Mainstream literary critics note that his bees symbolize both the harmony of nature and the poet's yearning for rural simplicity, reflecting Augustan ideals of restored pastoral virtue. You probably won't survive another page without tasting the honeyed imagery, so you whisper the lines to yourself. They build their delicate cells, six-sided wonders of wax, each a temple of industry. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. If only your spreadsheet formulas could be described so poetically, you'd actually enjoy quarterly reports. Yet, here, Virgil's verse transforms mundane hive work into a sacred ritual where bees become architects of perfect geometry and guardians of civilization's sweetness. A slender scribe at a nearby desk furrows his brow comparing Virgil's descriptions to earlier poems by Aratus and Callimachus, debating whether Latin poetry borrowed direct metaphors or reinvented them for a Roman audience. Scholars still argue whether bees in the Georgics represent pure nature or serve as allegories for Roman civic order, each worker bee dutifully performing tasks for the common good. The poet's emphasis on disciplined labor and communal harmony echoes contemporary calls for social cohesion under Augustus's reign. You trace your finger along a line describing bee-born nectar slipping through comb like tears of Jove marveling at the divine association. A fringed tale whispers that a certain Virgilian codex once attributed Virgil's inspiration to a dream in which Apollo appeared as a honeybee chanting pastoral secrets into the poet's ear. No solid evidence survives beyond medieval commentaries, yet the legend persists among bibliophiles, adding an air of mystique to every honeyed stanza. You shift to the section on hive management, where Virgil offers practical counsel. Place your skeps in olive groves far from the east wind's sting. Let thyme bloom near each opening to lure the faithful swarm. Mainstream agronomists praise these lines as early proto-agricultural manuals, noting that Virgil's instructions align closely with Cato's treatise and Pliny's encyclopedic echoes. Yet some classicists argue whether Virgil intended these passages as literal farming advice or as poetic devices to lend authenticity to his bucolic landscape. You close your eyes briefly, inhaling the faint aroma of beeswax that lingers in the reading room, courtesy of recent candlelight. A subtle understanding dawns. Virgil elevated the bee from mere producer to poetic emblem, weaving honeyed metaphors into the very tapestry of Roman identity. He didn't just catalog their labor, he celebrated their divine gift, sending each reader on a sensory journey through fields of bloom and buzzing air. You probably won't survive another stanza without recalling a light joke. If your morning commute were described by Virgil, you'd envision honey-dripped chariots crossing amber bridges instead of crowded streets. Yet the Georgics remind you that poetry has the power to transform the everyday into the sublime. In Virgil's world, bees are not distractions, but teachers, models of order, community, and the sweet rewards of diligent work. A small group of students gathers, reciting lines aloud in a soft, rhythmic cadence. And when the air grows calm, the watchful bees emerge to seek the nectar deep within the crimson cups of flowers. Their voices rise and fall in gentle unison, a living echo of the hive's own synchronized dance. You sense an almost ASMR-like quality, the rustle of papyrus, the murmur of Latin vowels, the hum of shared understanding. As you stand and close the scroll, you reflect on how Virgil's bees have shaped centuries of literary tradition, inspiring poets from Dante to Goethe to sink into honeyed reverie. The bees, he described, continue to buzz in minds and gardens, their metaphorical wings carrying the weight of human aspiration. You turn away from the lectern, carrying with you the golden echo of Virgil's lines. In every hive you'll now hear more than buzzing. You'll hear poetry, a symphony of sweetness and structure, a testament to Rome's enduring bond with its smallest, most poetic workers. You stand before a cluster of gleaming skeps nestled in a sun-dappled alcove, each hive sealed with delicate wax seals that bear the farmer's mark. The morning air is thick with anticipation, the soft drone of bees weaving through flowers like a hidden melody. Here, among honeyed corridors of wax, you learn that the Romans looked to these tiny creatures not just for honey, but for omens, signs whispered by bees that foretold fate itself. You probably won't survive another day in Rome without heeding their flight, but here you are, heart fluttering with each wing beat. As you lean in, a seasoned beekeeper points to two scouts circling above the hive entrance. See how they dip and swirl. he murmurs.
That's a good omen, a sign. The harvest will be abundant. Mainstream sources note that Roman farmers often watched bee flight at dawn. Bees departing directly east meant fair weather, while erratic, confused patterns portended storms. Historians still argue whether these interpretations evolved from practical observations, bees avoiding rain-laden winds, or from deeper spiritual beliefs linking bees to Mercury, messenger of the gods. You probably won't survive without a light joke, if only your morning commute offered weather forecasts with such precision you'd never leave an umbrella behind. But here, the bee's own afternoon flight chart is all the meteorology you need. Next, the beekeeper demonstrates a fringed tidbit. He crushes a small slug by the hive entrance and watches the bees recoil. Some say he whispers with a grin that if the bees reject a scent, it foretells betrayal, perhaps a friend's hidden envy, while no contemporary medical text endorses slug scent divination. Local lore swears by it, and late Republic pamphlets mention bee council advisors who interpreted such signs for noble families. You chuckle. Imagine hiring a bee therapist to decode your social circle. A breeze stirs the blossoms. You close your eyes and listen to the hum merging with distant temple bells. Scholarly debate simmers beneath the blossoms. Did Roman beekeepers genuinely believe in such supernatural portents, or were these omens a veneer atop agricultural wisdom used to persuade uncertain landowners to honor the hive? Some classicists argue that writings by Columella deliberately downplay superstition in favor of pragmatic advice, suggesting a tension between folklore and agricultural science. You shift your weight and notice pollen-laden bees returning in perfect V-formation wings, glittering like minuscule glass. That's a sign of good health in the colony, the beekeeper explains, voice soft as wax. Yet, to Romans, it also meant prosperity for the household gods. The Romans associated bees with Vesta, goddess of the hearth, believing that a thriving hive ensured her favor at the household flame. Mainstream studies record that honey offerings to Vesta were common in domestic shrines, reinforcing the idea that bees were divine messengers carrying prayers in their pollen baskets. You probably won't survive without noting a light joke if your home Wi-Fi were as reliable as a hive's signal to the gods. You'd never call tech support again. Suddenly, a lone bee darts straight upward 4 times before spiraling back, a distinct 4-beat salute. The beekeeper's eyes gleam. That, he says, is a warning countless texts say 4 beats foretold war or plague. Historians still argue whether such bee warnings were retrospectively imposed after disasters, or if they genuinely guided Roman generals before march orders. Some wartime letters from the Gallic Wars mention omens from ravens and livestock, but no direct bee omen records survive, fueling debate over whether beekeepers ever truly influenced strategy. You squint at the hive entrance
where bees cluster in rhythmic patterns. A fringe notion suggests that certain sacred hives in Aventine District were said to mirror the fate's own spindle, each worker's movement reflecting one thread of destiny. While no archaeological evidence confirms these fate hives, the legend captivated poets and philosophers alike. You smile at the image, bees acting as cosmic seamstresses weaving the tapestry of your life. A soft chuckle escapes you as you recall the earlier slug test. Perhaps the bees are giving you mixed signals, first prosperity, then betrayal, then war.
If only your stock market app offered such flavorful insights. The beekeeper gestures to a small notebook, its pages filled with precise sketches of bee dances. He taps a series of circles and zigzags. This, he says, is a swarm omen. If scouts dance low swarming soon, it signals a swift departure, so move your skeps or lose half your workforce. Mainstream agronomists confirm that Romans timed new hive placements based on swarm predictions, ensuring they captured swarms for new apiaries. Yet some scholars argue whether the dance recordings were literal or allegorical devices in farm treatises. You lean closer to the hive, inhaling the sweet, warm breath of the comb. A gentle ASMR-like tingle spreads through your spine as you hear the bees' soft clicking, a low, intimate code. According to a fringe tale, the Grammatici Roman land surveyors once used specialized hives as oracles to decide boundary disputes, interpreting bee sounds as verdicts. While no legal text survives to confirm such practices, monuments in Pompeii depict scenes of landholders consulting a beehive or bee oracle before signing deeds, suggesting that folklore and law intermingled more than scholars admit. A light joke chirps in your head. If only your real estate lawyer offered apiary-based advice. Bee oracles could settle more contracts than endless footnotes. You close your eyes, letting the bees' song wash over you like warm honey. The world falls away until all you hear is synchronized wings, the soft thrum of life itself. In this suspended moment, you sense the unity of nature's spirit and empire woven together by bees' subtle messages. You step back, brushing wax from your fingers. The beekeeper offers you a small jar of honey to taste his own blend, a result of reading the bees' omens and tending them accordingly. As you dip a spoon in and let the golden liquid slide across your tongue, you feel the flavors of thyme lavender and unknown blossoms converge, an edible prophecy of balance and harmony. You probably won't survive the empire's fate without learning from these winged soothsayers. As the sunlight shifts, you thank the beekeeper and wander back toward Rome's white marble spires. The bees hum, guiding your steps. Their omens, whether divine wisdom or nature's practical counsel, have given you a deeper understanding of the secret language the Romans heard in every buzz. As you walk back toward the city center, the weight of the day's insights follows you like the soft hum of the bees.
The buzzing is still there, in the back of your mind, louder now, more pronounced, as though the bees themselves are calling you forward, urging you to see Rome, not just for its stone marble and triumphs, but for its deeper, quieter connections. They were never just workers. They were guardians, messengers, and even prophets. You can feel it now, the deeper hum that runs through everything, the pulse of nature, of empire, of life itself. Historians still debate whether the Roman reverence for bees extended beyond the practical to the metaphysical. Mainstream sources suggest that the symbolic significance of bees was rooted in Roman religious practices, where the creatures were seen as intermediaries between the human and divine realms. Yet there's a fringe belief that Roman statesmen and military leaders, in moments of uncertainty, would consult beekeepers not just for agricultural advice, but for signs that could influence their strategic decisions. Ancient texts speak of generals watching the behavior of bees before making critical battlefield moves, interpreting their swarming or flight patterns as omens of victory or defeat. You probably won't survive without reflecting on how much the Romans invested in their understanding of the natural world. Every detail of life, their food, their festivals, their warfare, even their government was tied to their ability to read the signs of nature, to interpret the subtle cues that governed the seasons, the skies, and the creatures around them. Bees, with their precise and methodical behavior, became more than just a symbol of prosperity. They were a model of order, of community, and of the divine rhythms that shaped the fate of the empire. A light joke flickers in your mind. If only modern leaders consulted bees before signing treaties or making policy decisions, perhaps world affairs would be a little sweeter. Yet, here in Rome, you sense that the wisdom the bees provided wasn't just about predicting the future. It was about understanding the deep interconnection of all things. The Romans didn't look at the bees as mere insects. They saw them as part of the divine order, teaching them the value of harmony, balance, and resilience. As you approach the towering walls of the Roman Forum, the city's pulse becomes louder, more tangible. The streets are alive with activity, but there's something different in the air today, a sense of unity, as if the rhythms of Rome and the rhythms of nature have come together in perfect sync. You pass the marketplace where jars of honey still gleam in the sunlight, their golden contents a symbol of the ever-present connection between the earth and the empire. Bees are everywhere, whether in the gardens, the fields, or the sacred spaces, tirelessly working to sustain the world around them. You pause for a moment by a statue of Juno, her outstretched hand illuminated by the fading light of the afternoon sun. The bees, always present, seem to hover near, as if acknowledging the goddess's power and grace. You recall that in some temples, the image of Juno was surrounded by beehives, symbolizing her role as protector of marriage and fertility. The Romans believed that the bees' devotion to their queen mirrored the loyalty and devotion that should exist within Roman families and, by extension, the empire itself. You probably won't survive without feeling the weight of these ancient connections. The bees were always more than just a source of honey. They were a symbol of everything the Romans held dear: discipline, community, industry, and connection to the divine. They were part of the tapestry that wove together the material and the spiritual, the human and the divine. And in that sense, they were not just workers. They were the very foundation upon which Roman prosperity was built. A final light joke rises in your mind. If only every city had its own bee colony, producing not just honey, but harmony. Perhaps then we'd all move through life a little more in sync, a little more connected to the rhythms of nature. But for now, as the city pulses with life and energy around you, you can't help but feel grateful for the ancient wisdom of the bees, whose hum still echoes through the streets of Rome, both a symbol of the past and a guide for the future. You tread carefully along a winding road that once formed part of the great Via Appia, its stones now uneven and cracked from decades of neglect. The distant roar of chariot wheels has faded into memory, replaced by the haunting hum of a few scattered hives clinging to life in overgrown roadside shrines. You probably won't survive another day in a crumbling empire without sensing its decline. Yet here you are, watching Roman beekeeping traditions unravel alongside political turmoil. By the 4th century CE, the empire's stability was fraying. Historians still argue whether economic collapse or military overextension sounded the first warning. Mainstream sources record that beekeeping, once a meticulous, highly organized practice codified in dozens of agricultural treatises, began to slump as estates were abandoned and trade routes disrupted. Swarms went uncollected, and many hives fell silent victims of neglect in a world too distracted by invasion and insurrection to notice a missing buzz. You see a shepherd boy discover a forgotten skep, half buried beneath brambles. He pries it loose. Inside you glimpse a few lethargic bees struggling to maintain their tiny realm. A fringed tale whispers that during Stilicho's retreat in 408 CE, his troops mutilated apiaries to prevent locals from gathering fresh honey, creating deliberate scarcity to control food supplies. No direct record corroborates this grim tactic, yet the story persists in rural lore, illustrating how beekeeping became collateral damage in broader power plays. A light joke crosses your mind: if only modern supply chains collapsed this dramatically, we'd all finally learn to bake sourdough and keep backyard hives. But here, the empire's fracturing has left beekeeping too precarious for romance hives go untended, wax molds, and honey ferments long before it reaches a jar. You come upon an overgrown estate where ancient stone pillars lean at precarious angles. Grapevines, once trained against marble balustrades, now choke the ruins. Hidden in the wreckage, you find a half-intact alvearius, a wooden frame hive etched with faded graffiti, celebrating a long-dead villicus who once tended dozens of colonies. Mainstream archaeological digs note that by the late Empire, many such apiaries were abandoned, their managed hives replaced by opportunistic feral swarms and wild honey, less predictable, less bountiful. Scholars still debate whether the fall in honey production triggered a decline in beeswax availability for liturgical needs. Yet church records from the 5th century lament dwindling candle supplies, forcing bishops to ration light during services. Some claim that the Western Church's increasing reliance on olive oil lamps partly stemmed from a beeswax shortage. Others argue that the shift reflected theological preferences rather than ecological necessity. Either way, the era's flickering sanctuary lights echo the empire's own fading glory. You wander into a small village where the local praelatura has repurposed skeps into crude water jugs, the comb long since stripped for candle stubs. An elderly beekeeper, her once steady hands now tremulous, recites a classical recipe from Columella for a honey and vinegar mead that once cured dysentery. She sighs, admitting the ingredients are too scarce now. Only the wealthiest monasteries can afford to maintain a few hives. A fringe rumor insists that certain hermit monks hoarded apiaries in secret valley retreats, preserving ancient strains of Italian honeybees for some coming resurgence. No monastic diary verifies this, but the idea offers a sliver of hope amid decay. You probably won't survive another moment without pondering a light joke. If only we could resurrect the Empire's legendary hives like a bonus season of your favorite show, Rome Beekeepers Rising. But real life seldom offers neat revivals. A solitary skep perches atop a collapsed pavilion. Its occupants, a lean colony of survivor bees, buzz low, their numbers too few to thrive. You crouch to examine the comb cells, half filled with crystallized honey, the rest empty caverns, echoing silence. It's a stark symbol of tradition, faltering, meticulous Roman hive architecture, giving way to ad hoc survival. Mainstream climatologists note that the late Empire also faced climatic fluctuations, colder winters, and erratic rainfall, compounding the human crisis. Bees, sensitive to weather, withdrew or died en masse during harsh seasons, further depleting honey reserves. Historians still argue whether these environmental stresses or human factors played the larger role in apicultural decline. The answer, it seems, lies somewhere between famine war and shifting seasons. You rise and continue along the road, each step stirring dust from kilometers of Lilliputian labor. A mixed fragrance of wilted flowers and fermenting honey wafts from a distant hedge. A light joke flits through your mind. If only your office plants could tell you when they need watering. Bees were far more reliable than your watering can. Ahead, you glimpse the ruins of a once grand basilica, its mosaics shattered. In a crumbling apse, a pair of modern hives, a monk's attempt at revival, glow newly painted. The humble Christian beekeeper tends these colonies, hoping to resurrect a fragment of Roman legacy. He greets you with a shy smile and offers a spoonful of honey from a fresh comb, earthy, floral, and achingly scarce. As you taste the amber sweetness, you realize that even amid decline, the Roman bee continues to hum, a tenacious echo of an age when empire and apiary rose together. The traditions may falter, but the rhythm persists, however faint. You step away carrying that rare drop of honey as a poignant reminder civilizations may crumble, yet the humble bee endures its tiny wings, beating against the currents of time. The sun has long set, and the quiet stillness of Rome's streets envelops you once more. You walk beneath the archways and through the narrow lanes where torches flicker and cast long shadows across ancient stone walls. The night air is cool. The hustle of the day, now replaced by the soft murmur of those still awake, exchanging stories and goods under the dim light. But amid the sounds of life, there's something that lingers, the steady buzz of bees, their presence as constant and eternal as the empire itself. You realize now that the bees, as much as any emperor or soldier, have endured through the ages. Historians still debate whether Rome's decline truly spelled the end of beekeeping in the empire, or whether the tradition simply shifted underground, preserved by the rural villagers' monasteries and smaller agricultural communities that inherited the mantle. Mainstream historical accounts suggest that during the collapse of the Western Empire, many of Rome's refined agricultural systems, including organized beekeeping, were severely disrupted. Yet there's a fringe theory that claims the quiet rhythms of the bees persisted in the shadows of history, sheltered by those who recognized their sacred and practical value. You probably won't survive without reflecting on the resilience of the bees. They were never just creatures of the countryside, nor were they simply workers. They were symbols of Roman prosperity, indicators of health, and even the divine custodians of the empire's spiritual vitality. The empire may have crumbled, but in the quiet corners of the world, in the abandoned villas and overgrown gardens, the bees continued their work, their hum, the last thread connecting Rome's past to its future. A light joke passes through your thoughts. If only we could look at our modern problems the way the Romans looked at the bees, appreciating their role in sustaining balance, in serving a larger purpose, even when the world around them was in flux. It seems so simple. Move in rhythm with nature, not against it. But in this moment you realize that the key to Rome's greatness was always this harmony, a harmony that, like the bees, endured quietly through the chaos, working behind the scenes to ensure that the cycle of life continued. As you walk toward the banks of the Tiber, you see the faint glow of lights reflected on the water's surface, and in the distance you hear the faintest hum. You stop close your eyes and listen closely. The bees, it seems, are still with you, whispers of their labor lingering in the cool night air. The great empire may be gone, but its echoes remain. The rhythm of the bees, the pulse of their flight continues to hum through the ages, a reminder that even the most powerful of civilizations are built upon the quiet work of the smallest beings. A final light joke lingers in your mind: if only we could be as steadfast as the bees, constantly working, constantly giving, without ever needing recognition. Maybe then we would all have a little more honey in our lives.
But as you listen to their steady hum, you realize that the bees didn't need recognition. They simply needed to do their work, and in doing so, they created a legacy that continues to thrive quietly but powerfully through the passage of time. You continue your walk along the Tiber, the city now fading into a peaceful silence, and as you move through the dark streets, you know that just like the bees, you are part of the greater rhythm that has always carried the world forward, one steady beat at a time.